to Rich Walsh's retirement ceremony. Unique venue for a unique person. So we're here to celebrate dedicated military service. And as many of you know, a standard military retirement ceremony is steeped in tradition. It's a time-honored, symbolism-filled event. It reflects the collective wisdom of generations of service members distilled into a tight, prescribed package. Dress uniforms, side boys, whistles, speeches from dignitaries that are more for show than relationship. And I know because I wrote a ton of those for an album at one point. And there's nothing wrong with tradition. It's the core that binds institutions together, creates certainty amidst the chaos of war, and for the Navy amidst the depths of expansive oceans. But sometimes institutions need a little shaking up. They need people to poke their head above the plane, a target to be felled, but also a beacon that others can look to for inspiration. So in true Rich Walsh fashion, we're going to honor him with a ceremony befitting the unique perspective he brought to the Navy. So rather than outsourcing this event to a nameless admin officer, this was organized by a band of brothers and sisters who knew we had to send Rich off in the right way. For those who don't know me, my background isn't important except to say I've known Rich for 10 years. We've been in the trenches of defense innovation time and again. We played the game of Sir and Petty Officer Walsh in front of our betters, while I silently rolled my eyes, waiting to get back to shaking the status quo with my friend, Rich. And in a way, Rich and I were bonded by our deviations from the traditional system. Rich refused to be promoted beyond first-class petty officer. I didn't take jobs until we promote beyond lieutenant commander. Yet our imprints, Rich's imprints, on the Navy and Department of Defense will leave a longer legacy than many admirals. In outlining our agenda, I want to start by relating something a wise friend once told me. In reference to leading large organizations, he said, "The building doesn't love you back." And for those Marines in the audience, I'll break that down on what he meant. Like many of us, the military ingrained in me a deep sense of loyalty. When I left active service, I was racked with guilt and uncertainty. I was disturbed. The Navy didn't seem to care I was leaving, and I had left things undone. What would happen in my absence? This clearly egotistical belief had another need that I was trying to fill. The need to feel loved by the institution I had for decades know I did too. It turns out I was merely a keeper for a time of a long tradition of service. My love for the organization did not need to be reciprocated. Indeed, it was better that it did love me back, because the Navy needed to endure in my absence. It needs to endure in Rich's absence. But just because the institution of the Navy doesn't love Rich back, it doesn't mean we can't love Rich back. And the folks gathered in this room are a testament to the love we all feel for Rich.
We love you, Rich!
Yeah, sometimes.
Thank you, Jonah. So that's what I want to focus our attention on today. We're going to spend time reflecting on the man he is and the friendships his approach created. We'll do a couple things. We'll review Rich's storied career. We'll then hand it over to y'all to share stories about why Rich is important in your life. I'll finalize with my story, introduce the word, and then justifiably celebrate at the bar with some drinks afterwards. All right, so it's a great day to celebrate Rich Walsh. Before we dive into folks' reflections and stories, I want to share where Rich has been. So he started out as a young seaman at the Fleet Readiness Center before being stationed on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, where he made first-class petty officer in 7 years, where he remained for 13 years. From the Dwight D. Eisenhower, went to the USS Lincoln, and then YVAM, the Casino Rapid Innovation Cell. Following that, he was recruited to join the Naval Innovation Advisory Council, then with the United States Fleet Forces Command, the Digital Warfare Office, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, and finally his current role with the Strategic Warfighting Innovation Cell. A lot of innovation, a lot of leaders he influenced, a lot of people he touched in deep ways. And to that point, I want to turn it over to you, the people who know Rich best, a story that you have from him being in the Navy. And I'll start with my friend, Jason Knudsen, who spent a lot of time with you and I in the crypt, making crazy things. Go ahead, buddy.
Oh. Well, it took me a long time to sort this stories I have about Rich to find one that was clean enough to tell a group of people in a public audience. But I've sorted through and I thought through a couple of stories I'd like to share with you. The first thing, when you look at Rich, he's got kind of this grizzled, Montana kind of look to him. He's always got kind of this little baby face on him. But in the crick, when I looked at Rich, what I saw was, for the analogy of a bull in a china shop. Well, imagine you could take that bull in a china shop, put it in a grenade, and throw it into any meeting that you wanted at any time, and have the reliable effect of a bull in a china shop. That is Rich. Rich is a reliable bull that you can throw into a room full of glass creatures with any sort of rake on them, and that room will come out significantly changed. And there were many places in the Navy and in the world that need that, where the glass gets a little bit dusty and you just need to wipe that place out and completely change the way people think. And so for me, that is Rich. And the one thing that Rich always needed around him was a group of supporters, a group of people that when that happens, because Rich will go launch his own grenade if you let him, but he needs people who are going to protect him. He needs people around him because he is that petty officer that's going in and facing down the 3 stars and the 4 stars, facing down the grumpy Marines, facing down the entrenched GS-15 who's been there forever. And what can you teach me, petty officer? So, let me tell you a couple stories about the crick trips we went on. In the crick, we got to go to some cool places. And we got to visit them before they were cool, right? This is when Google Glass was cool. It was just coming out, right? We got an admiral to stand up with Google Glass and brief with Google Glass on. It was really cool back in, 2013, 2014? Yeah, we were really cool. We got to go to Silicon Valley before everybody went through Silicon Valley. There were still a couple of people there. One of the groups we met was a small group called BM&T Partners. When we went out there, we met them in this little like pizzeria. They lived above they had a place above the laundromat, right above this little like 3-person shop, something called Palantir. And Rich and I got a chance to go over to Google Ventures. We were talking to some venture capitalists, and afterwards, the team decided they were going to go on this little tour. And Rich and I and one other guy were like, "Hey, let's hang out at Google for a little bit." And so we're walking around, and we walk up, we see this long line of like 17, 18, 19-year-olds walking in, and they're walking through this line. And as they walk through, they get handed something, and they get handed. Has anybody seen the noodler hats? The little hats with the propeller on them, right? And Rich leans over and he's like, "Let's get a hat." And so we sat in that line, the oldest people in that line. Like, we were completely out.
In suits, mind you.
In suits. We were the only ones in
Silicon
suits.
Valley.
In Silicon Valley. Completely, because somebody told us we had to wear a jacket. That was probably where I was started. And we walked through there, and we got up to the woman who's handing out the Noodler hats for all the Google interns. She looks at us and she goes, "Do you know you can buy these in the gift shop, don't you?" She just assumed that we worked at Google. And so we ended up getting our Noodler hats. We took bikes. You know, they got bikes that you can get rent and take around. We took them, we drove them into Palo Alto to a bar, had drinks, and sat down with the inventor of, what was it, the GameCube controller or something like that. And we had great drinks. So this is the first lesson that I want you to take from Rich, right? Rich doesn't need to be told he's an innovator. Rich doesn't need to be put in a box. Rich steps into the line and goes and grabs the hat and takes it. And so what I was always inspired by Rich, that first lesson, is that nobody's going to tell you to go and disrupt it. You just need to know what needs to be done. And Rich has always known that it needs to be done, is willing to go grab the silly hat to make it happen. Second story, same trip. So there we were, on the plane, heading out. And Rich is showing me, he's like, hey, Jason, I want to show you this article. Did you know? And I didn't know. But did you know there's these things called bat bombs? I was like, what are you talking about, Rich? He's like, yeah, in World War II, they're experimenting and they were going to take these incendiary bombs and they would put them on bats and the bats would fly and they would be on a timer and they would all go to sleep in the roofs of these people's houses in Japan, and then all the bombs would go off at once. He's like, yeah. He's like, and there's this other thing, there's like pigeon-guided missiles. Have you heard about this? Anybody heard about pigeon-guided missiles? They trained a pigeon to peck on a place on a picture, and you could use that to actually guide a missile. So you put the pigeon inside the missile, and it would constantly peck on the target. And that's how you could control it. He goes, and even better, there's this lab in Florida that just discovered that they can use rat neurons to control unmanned systems. And they will actually learn how to navigate in a map. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice, Rich. Okay, yeah. And he just as enthusiastic as ever been. If you've ever been in like a Rich is excited about something moment, anybody ever been there? Yeah. You know that the passion that comes from this young man over here is unbridled. And so we walk into Navy postgraduate school, and we walk in to Cruiser, which is their unmanned system. And if you've ever been to Navy postgraduate school, they're way too serious for a California surfing location. And we walk in, and the PhD has just told us about all of their certifications, and I went to Stanford, and I went here, and I went here. We have a coalition of 120 other PhDs, and we just launched the largest singly controlled drone swarm. And Rich raises his hand. And this is like bull in a china shop grenade moment. And Rich goes, have you ever thought about controlling those things with rat brains? And the look on this guy's face, he's like, is this guy making fun of me? And I think he even said that. He's like, are you kidding? He goes, no, I'll send you the paper. So the thing about Rich is, Rich is one of the most widely read, intelligent people I've ever met, right? From the way he went going after Navy's readiness problems and fixing F-18 readiness, to anything he goes into, he is a deep dive type guy, right? And he is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know in any subject that he's passionate about. If he's not passionate about, try to get him interested. But that intellectual curiosity and the courage to go places where people don't is another thing that's really inspiring. So that's the second one. And the third one is, believe it or not, Rich has matured over time. I would have paid to be his master chief on his first aircraft carrier. He just told me some stories. But
I've got a few chiefs fired over the years.
You have gotten a few chiefs fired over the years. Rich's contest with the Chiefs mess is famous. I don't think you've ever done a car wash. So Rich gets gets invited. This is during the stand-up of the NIAC stuff, which is where I met several of the members here. And the Marine Corps really jumped into this Secretary of the Navy innovation stuff. And Rich got invited to go and brief big Marine Corps innovation at the Marine Corps Warfighting Center, all right? He stands up on stage in front of the Commandant of the Marine Corps there?
Most of the leadership of the Marine Corps.
Most of the leadership of the Marine Corps. And they've been through a whole day of briefing of how the Marines are trying to pivot, and every Marine's a rifleman, and now every Marine's also an innovator. And he stands up and he goes, "That's awesome. That's all. Well, it's kind of, who you're looking for? You're looking for somebody who's about to be kicked out of the Marine Corps." And he goes in and he starts listing off all the characteristics. And you know what? You know how I know this? Because that person is me. And that kind of self-deprecation in front of senior leadership, that ability to go look at both the positives and the errors that you've made and create a learning environment and use that in front of senior leaders to disarm everybody and bring the truth to them. That is the last thing that I want you to think about when you think about Rich. Because he's a grenade. He's an intellectual powerhouse, right? He is bold and take action. But at the end of the day, he's humble and he learns and he teaches us and he uses those lessons to teach us what we should be. And for us as officers, being close to somebody who's humble, who's smart, who's kind, who's dynamic, like Rich, has been one of the best experiences of my life. And I'm sitting here today, Rich, and I'm telling you, I would be a different person right now if I hadn't met you. And thank you for coming into my life, for coming into our lives. Thank you for your time in the Navy. For the time you spent, it was valuable to all of us. It was valuable to the Navy. And the Navy and the United States would not be what it is today if it wasn't for your contributions. And the last piece is, as a friend, thank you for being my friend for over a decade.
All right.
So I was up here. Little did I know, right, Rich? Little did I know. All right, my name's Christopher Lloyd. Yes, just like the actor. You will hear Rich call me Doc. I have known him apparently for a very, very long time now. So I was a second class petty officer when he came to FRC. Then, was it FRC yet, or was it? It was FRC Oceana. It used to be AIND Oceana. And I got a lot of stories because I also was his division leading petty officer on the Dwight D. Eisenhower when, as he said, the epic grenades come flying into the chief's mess. And IM-3, as it would be said. And it began the war, as it was stated so eloquently, between Richard Walsh and the United States Navy's chief mess. So anyway, I saw your daughter grow up. I was there. We were good friends. We hung out quite often. But I never really will say this. I didn't know Rich as really Petty Officer Walsh. I knew him as Rich. And I was Rich's friend, even though a lot of the times in the Navy, it was, you had to make a decision where you stood and how you would stand in certain situations. At least to say it took me 17 years to be chief, so that'll tell you something right there. I made chief very quick, first class very quickly too. I made it 9, he made it 7. You know, right around the same year, I believe, very close. He just came in a little later than I did. And I knew Rich the man, and he is a great man. And I am thankful that I'm here. I was talking to the wife and I said, we're gonna go see Rich. And I said, well, he invited me, so I'm gonna go see him. I retired a little over a year ago, and once again, great man. And the Navy's gonna be lesser for you being up. And I can't follow that, man. I'm just gonna do me. All right, Rich, love you, buddy. Good to see you.
I'm not sure who's known him maybe one of the other ones. So I'm Gary Shrout. I had the privilege of running into Rich at a boots on the deck aboard USS Kearsarge in February of 12, almost to the day. So for 11 years, I've known Rich. And he was there to get the Airspeed Innovator of the Year award, no surprise to anybody here. And they managed to put us at the same lunch table. We got to talking, and the rest is history. And here we are. So I've made a few notes. We're here to honor the accomplishments and career of a very exceptional young man. It's Rich. We met at the Boots on the Deck at Kearsarge. Rich, I think, is the one who asked me to pick my brain afterwards. At the time, I was the strategic communicator for the Naval Aviation Enterprise, or as I described my job, I was the explainer. Wally Massenberg was running the show at that point still, and it was really a good effort. And Rich, you know, most of us worried just about getting through the day and getting the task done and getting back the next day without killing ourselves and all that. And there was a phrase before it got politicized, you know, draining the swamp, making it a better place. Rich's focus in its entirety was always making the Navy a better place, making the Navy more capable, making the Navy more efficient, making the Navy a better place for our enlisted folks to have more opportunity and to use their brains better. His efforts when he went on to the Navy Warfare Development Command, for which I was a plank owner, warmed my heart because I could see what he was doing. I could see his efforts in the creek, in these trips that we've heard described, and that Rich and I had many a conversation along the way about those different trips, and always a high five over the phone if we weren't sometimes down in Norfolk visiting them and that. And knowing that Rich's folks were so far away in Montana, we tried, my wife Carol and I tried to be surrogate parents as best we could to Rich along the way. And we've seen him go through his triumphs and his tribulations. And one of those people standing in the wings supporting him, like you said, encouraging him. Every now and then we got the ability to actually provide him a little bit of assistance, which is a privilege and an honor. And celebrating Rich's active duty time as we wrap it up here. As has been said a couple of times, the Navy is a better place. Our country is in better shape because of your efforts. And we owe you a deep debt of gratitude. And I can't think of a better way to express that and articulate that than the very famous song that Frank Sinatra popularized, My Way. So I'm going to read the lyrics. And now the end is near. So I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear. I state my case, of which I am certain. I've lived a life that's full, traveled each and every highway, and much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each chartered course, each careful step along the byway, and much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off a bit more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood tall, and I did it my way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried. I've had my fill, my share of losing, and now as tears subside, I find it all so amusing. To think that I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh, no, not me. I did it my way. For what is a man, what has he got, if not himself? Then he has naught. To say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows, and I did it my way. Yes, it's my way. Rich, we love you. Congratulations. You've had a stellar career, and we're all better for you being in our lives. Thank you so much.
I was in Silicon Valley at that trip that Jason mentioned. So I sat down, I think it was a Mexican place. place, actually. Yeah, it was a Mexican place. It was a Mexican place. So
Really loud decor.
very, yes, exactly. Very colorful, lots of primary colors, lots of the little cutout. Yeah, it was great. So I'm an enlisted Marine. So I got sat at the little kids table with Rich, and I'd like to think I'm well read, but I think about halfway through our like chimichangas or whatever, I had the mental equivalent of like wanting to go stretch. You know, like we started talking, and I was like, oh, okay. All right, Rich. Like, you want to talk? You want to drop names of books? Like, let's get into this, right? And so, I came away from that. The food was fine, but the company was amazing. There's some fantastic humans, and I'm close friends with them to this day. But the thing that I really took away was from my time in the Corps, I rarely met an incredibly widely read and thoughtful enlisted person who was willing to throw in with anyone who was in any room and just share their opinions and get the conversation going. Not be afraid to be the catalyst for the conversation, not be afraid of the person who's not agreeing or building on someone else's point, but constantly inserting new ideas and challenging people's thinking regardless of rank. And I didn't even know that was a possible thing. So seeing him in uniform with all these other incredibly impressive people from the Navy, but seeing him stand toe-to-toe with different people, being confronted with that wasn't something I had actually been in my experience to that point. So it fundamentally changed my understanding of what was possible as somebody serving in active duty as an enlisted person at that moment. And that was a really big takeaway for me. So coming away from that lunch, I was changed, and this was 9 years ago, I think, and I'm still getting the benefits of that. So I had an R raise for me, which rarely happens, and I really appreciate that. So Rich, congratulations. Looking forward to what you're doing next.
Thank you.
All right.
Sir, I love the fact that you read My Way. Rick does definitely have, Rich has his way, and I believe that there are probably a lot more people in the Navy who didn't appreciate Rich's way than do. And as I look around this room, I'm just amazed at the faces that you've been able to bring together. I mean, some of these faces wouldn't drive across the street for some people in the Navy. Right? Jason came from Croatia. I was complaining about coming across the but I did. And the last time I saw Rich, I believe this is true, was at my retirement ceremony. So 3.5 years ago, I left the Navy, and I thought long and hard. I loved your comments about what traditional ceremonies look like. Mine was more traditional than this, for sure. But when I thought about the things that I wanted to do that day, is celebrate the people who I admired most, right? So, and like Rich, flip the script a little, and Rich was my presiding officer as a first class petty officer. Rich was my last salute in uniform. Some of you, I think it was Jason, might have been the guy who brought Rich to my attention when he was in the crick. And I admired all of you cricksters, or crickets, you guys wouldn't go with that, but I tried to call you crickets. Cricksters from afar, and watching what you did was rather amazing and inspiring. And it wasn't until I got down to Suffolk, Virginia, I think Rich was sponsoring a Shark Tank, where I got to meet him in person. Got to see his enthusiasm, his passion in person. It was later in my time in Suffolk when I felt, my words, not yours, I felt as though he was cast aside by his parent command. And me knowing Rich how I did, and again, it was just from afar, it made me sad that his parent command would cast him aside and not see value in him as a first-class petty officer. On the other hand, I was in command at the time. I saw great value in him, and I wanted more Rich Walshes, across our hallways. And ultimately, we found a way to make that happen. We got him TUI over 1 day a week is the best I think I could do at the time. And we were able to take much of what was already Rich's idea that became the Illuminate I don't know how you would call it right now, but I know it still lives. And some of your faces, like Jason brought it to 7th Fleet, and Admiral Breckenridge made it live, gave that time, trust, and top cover that made it happen. And, you know, as I said earlier, there are probably more people, unfortunately, who don't respect or appreciate Rich's way. We are here because we do. We wish there were more people who wore a uniform like you. I am personally pleased you are where you are at BM&T, doing the things to expand the lines that you've been doing all over. I've long appreciated your example. It's a pleasure to be here today to celebrate you. I know it's reluctant on your part, but just look around this room at these faces. I mean, the disruptive thinkers, right? The deaf guys, the crick, everything that we would like the Navy to be, Naval X. A lot of it was inspired by you and those like you and those who saw value in you. So I'm excited for what you're going to do next. I hope I can be helpful, and I will always remember the human being who I was able to render my last salute uniform to, and we all salute you today. So thank you.
I retired after 30 years about 3 years ago, and I met Rich at U.S. Fleet Forces Command in my my farewell tour after Ship Command and Squadron Command, and I thought honestly I was a pretty good leader at the time, you know, and I was suffering through kind of the drudgery of staff life, of the things that you do at a big command like that, and I was very fortunate to be a recipient of the things that you started with Rich, and then to be under the leadership of Admiral Breckenridge. We had this little thing going that made life at Fleet Forces Command so much better. You know, we did all the regular stuff, but then when I think we called it the green team at the time because it aligned with the green level of effort, or line of effort, which was high velocity learning at the time. But it was all about innovation and doing things differently and better. And we had this little team that started with a couple of 03s, and somehow we came across Rich. I think it was through Sean's recommendation. And the very first time that I met him, he challenged me, and I loved it. I hadn't been challenged like that before. It didn't matter what rank. He challenged me intellectually. He challenged me about my beliefs, and we had great conversations. And then we traveled. We set up this little thing. We built this workshop. We said, "Hey, Rich, I think we need some kind of a workbook for this." That's what I said, I think, right? And nobody else would make a workbook except an 06 who was getting ready to be like, "We need a workbook." What do you think, Rich? Can you make a workbook? And 2 days later, he provides like, "Yeah, I wrote the book." And it was awesome. And I still have it today. Top is it. It was awesome. So we traveled. We went out to Stanford and did a design thinking workshop out there. We went out to Japan, and that's when it really, really hit me. Because a lot of the folks that I know in this room are through Rich. And we were in Japan, and we were running these think shops with just sailors, just right off, you know. When you go out to Japan, which is busy if you've done any time there, it's super, super busy. So when somebody comes in and says, "We're going to do a think shop, we need volunteers," who do you think they pick off their ship, right? It's the folks that they think that they can offer up for the day, right? So we had a group of folks like that, and Rich was leading and facilitating, and I saw sailors, I mean, it still gets, you can tell, come to life and do things I never saw sailors do before. And I got to think, man, I wish I had met this guy earlier in my career. I would have been such a better leader had I known what I know now. But I'm so glad I did cross paths with you, Rich, and that we had that thing going, Admiral. He had the top cover. He had just a little bit more pull than Sean, so that we could get him full time on the crew. And it was just a period of learning, and you helped me at a time when I really didn't really know which direction I was going to go. And I started to think about myself and think about what I knew and learn things. And you introduced me to some it's like the land of the misfit toys here today, right? So we're all a little bit different. And that's good. And gosh, you're exactly right. This is exactly what we need more of in the Navy and Marine Corps, right? We just don't recognize it. So thank you for opening my eyes to that. More importantly, thank you for your continued friendship. We just shared about a 90-minute conversation the other day. I always learn something from Rich. Talk about diving deep. Holy smokes. I've done the math, right? We said that. I've done the math. I believe you've done the math. It's like, I read all these books. Just give me the, Cliff Notes version. But yeah, awesome individual. I'm sure he's going to do phenomenal things. And when you're doing phenomenal things, I'm an excellent driver. You carry a briefcase. I'm happy to, and I'm available. So, so thanks, Rich. Love you, man. Happy.
That's what I feel like doing. I've known Rich off and on. Met him, I think, online long before we ever actually worked together. In a group of basically former cricksters and other innovators who basically did their thing. The Navy was like, yeah, that was great. Thank you so much for your innovation. And then sent you back to the fleet. And so they all congregated online and promptly churn their way and continue to work their way to influence that way. And that's where I met Rich. Working through this online chat room, you could trace Rich's feelings and how well he was working and how satisfied he was with his job with a number of rants online. When Rich was in a place that was truly understanding and accepting of his ideas, he went quiet. When he was in a fight with the chief's mess or in a job that was unsatisfying and trying to put him into a box and make him a chief, his rants were exponential. Entertaining, educational, but in large volume and quantity. And then I actually met Rich, and I worked with him in N73 as we tried to do this misfit thing. And it was great, our time together. I learned a lot, like kind of everybody has said. We had many conversations. None of them are acceptable in wardrooms, chief's mess, or anywhere on board a ship. And I grew a lot learning from his perspective. To echo the statements, it's always nice as an officer when you have somebody who's like, yeah, you say that, and this is what everybody else hears, and you're like, oh, fuck, that's not what I meant. So I had many translation conversations, and I appreciated all of that. Rich, everyone here has talked about your intellectual curiosity and your passion. As you go forth into the world to do better and more amazing things, maintain those. Those are some of the most amazing aspects of you. I know you don't let anyone you don't take too much to heart when people throw stones, but continue to wear that armor because they're just jealous. Just remember that going forth, and look forward to seeing you do amazing things for whatever you choose to do going forward.
All right. And I met Rich driving to Pax River with Tyson. I don't know how we met up or where we met up. We were in my 1998 Land Cruiser, and I remember driving to Pax River, and he's like, we're talking about airplane shit. And he said, you got to talk to my friend Rich about something he did in Excel that we were paying millions of dollars for some performer to go make that they weren't doing. And that, I've never worked with Rich professionally, but at that moment I was like, this is a big finger, right? I was like, wait, what? You're not like some PhD dude? And I was like, wow, this is incredible. So Rich and I have had a great relationship, and I think Tyson, and meeting all the other Cricksters and this group of like massive innovators, which is just a disruptive group of thinkers, and I really appreciate that. But what I love about Rich is every time we talk, maybe every couple of weeks or so, right? But it's like an epic podcast between the two of us. And the conversation, I look back at my phone, I'm like, we were just on the phone for 3 hours. It's like a Joe Rogan podcast. I'm like, I don't even know what we talked about. And then during COVID, through all of it, it was really great. And I definitely think that you've made the Navy way better than it was before Rich was here. And that is self-evident. And you made me better. I do appreciate and share the sentiment that a lot of people said here. You challenge people to think, right? And that is an important thing. And it makes us grow, right? If you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, you'll always be great. So you do that, and you do it in a very polite and respectful way, unless you're wearing stars.
Or anchors.
So I've heard.
Same thing.
But I just want to say congratulations. Thank you. I'm excited for you and what you're going to go accomplish in life. So thanks for letting me speak.
All right.
I don't want to talk a lot, but I do want to mention and reiterate a lot of what you all have said, how much you have really impacted my life, and I don't think all of you guys really realize that. So I knew these Christers. I was the science advisor at MWDC at the time. It was my first science advisor tour, and I was learning like with these guys too. So they drug me along on all their trips, and I greatly appreciate that because I learned as much, if not more, than you guys did, even though I pretended to know what I was talking about. What you guys taught me, and then what you've taught these people from what I'm listening to, is really how to ask questions, to get out there, to reach, to not be afraid, to not be so afraid of protocol and so afraid of what people tell you you're supposed to be that you don't step out and ask those questions, that you don't ask why, that you don't stop learning and keep asking. And that, to me, really, you taught me how to pick up a book again. Not that I haven't been a forever student for my entire life, but I read more books when I was with you guys than I ever had before in my life. I learned the value of really understanding multidisciplinary type of engineering, to think creatively, to think outside of the box. I thought I knew how to do it. Like, you guys came in, I'm like, yeah, I'm their science back here. I'm gonna teach you how it's done, right? No, you guys taught me how it was done. And I am very grateful to that. And the Navy is very grateful to that. And I don't know how much you guys know how much these Christers have really impacted the Navy, but it is really incredible. Things that they've worked on, every one of them, every single one of them, is in some way being used today and has grown. And I could go through each one of their projects and tell you how it's being used in the Navy today and why that's valuable. Richard, you taught us how to take something that was right in front of our eyes, understand the data, and use the data. This was before data science or really understanding data was a thing. And, people always said, we're data driven, right? But they weren't looking at the data right in front of their very eyes. And you taught us to do that. And you taught us that if we take the time to ask those questions of what we already have, we're going to really learn phenomenal things. To this day, we're still using that. And the people that you touched are using that very simple lesson. And data science is an incredible part of where we're going forward in the future. And you were a big part of it. So I think I feel honored to have been a part of you all's journey, and that you let me be a part of that journey. And so I want to say thank you. And congratulations on retiring. You've earned it, but don't stop. What you've done is incredible. And I know sometimes it's exhausting. Being somebody who doesn't go and follow the rules is exhausting because people try to beat you up all the time. And they try to bring you down, and they try to bring you back to some level of thing that they understand. But don't stop, because your impact, all of you guys, the impact that you've had on the Navy, it is incredible. It is long lasting and it is impactful. Don't stop, because we all remember what you've done, and you have had extreme purpose and extreme value. So thank you for that. Keep going, and I look forward to seeing a great future.
I can't, even come close to the other tributes that have been made about such a great friend and such a great leader. But about a month ago, I was in London, and I had a chance to go to Winston Churchill War Room. For those of you that haven't been there, I highly recommend it. It's these underground bunkers of where Churchill and his team fought the war against Nazi Germany. And in the bunker, there's a quote attributed to Winston Churchill. It sort of goes like this: "What is the use of living, if it be not to strive for valiant causes, and to leave this muddled world a better place for those who live in it after we are gone?" And I think that's a very appropriate quote tonight, because a couple things. What is the use of living if we can't strive for valiant causes? And sometimes that's hard. And I've heard a lot of the attributes of Rich Walsh and what he stands for and who he is, but to me it's courage, right? It's that crazy willingness to do radical things against everything that's trying to stomp at and tamp at. I view it as a valiant cause way of living. And he epitomizes it. And to me, that's always been an inspiration. The second part of the quote, it's a muddled world, right? I mean, is it not? Here we are today. Who could believe that in our lifetime, Russia would invade Ukraine? It's just preposterous. You look at China and their activities and sort of where they're leaning. And so it's a muddled world. How do we make it better for those who are going to live in it after we're done? And I think all of us, in the little gifts that we've been given with our lives, have that opportunity to try to make it a little better. And so I will say, Rich, I think you've done that. And as you finish this chapter of service to country and being a rebel and getting us all to get off our butts and think differently for a world that's muddled, that needs leadership, you were a change agent for that. And for that, I salute you. The other quote that came to mind as I was sitting listening to all these tributes is from the musical The Sound of Music, and it's not quite Frank Sinatra, but it's the song "What do you do with a problem like Marie?" Right? So Rich, I'll just tell you, there's a part of you that's a problem. And what do you do with a problem like Rich Walsh? And so, that was my opportunity as I had the privilege of coming alongside. Is my good friend John Richardson, who was the chief of naval operations at the time, was really serious about, hey, I want to change an institution like the United States need, put it into a different direction. And how do I do that? How do I lead change? How do I how can I turn the rudder on an aircraft carrier like the Navy and alter its future? And there's a lot of folks that try to tackle that challenge, but it really wasn't until Rich joined the team that we had a half a chance to really fundamentally shift the direction of the Navy for this muddled time in which we live. And so again, courage, I mentioned, service to country, which is important, and part of this, although we beards now, we're all in civilian clothes, and there's no quarterdeck for us to pipe on shore and to give them that last salute. I commend you, much like I did with our brother Bruno at his retirement. It's important, in these life moments to go ahead and end the chapter right with the appropriate recognition, gratefulness, and gratitude of us in this room and the nation. And Rich, your courage, your tenacity to drive for good is just highly commendable. But the last quality that I think of with Rich Walsh and who he is as a man, as a leader, is his heart. He has a heart that is always after good. You could take a guy like him, the intellect, the raw talent, the innovative spirit, and without that heart, that pure heart that really drives to do the right thing, that could all be used for wrong purposes. And so for me, what's touched my heart in a little bit of time that we had overlapping together is I can always see his motive was right, and he just needed a little bit of top cover to go about the daunting task, changing the Navy and making this muddled world a better place for those who live in it after we're gone. So shipmate, I salute you and thank you for your leadership.
Met Rich, I liked him. We had just started the Casino Rapid Innovation Cell and gone through the first application process and had a very formalized process. We had interviews, we had applications, and all of a sudden we got this wild card in front of Mitch, who was Rich. And he joined the CRIC one day, and the commander who was in charge said, this is the guy we need in the organization. And from that moment, I knew there was a guy that was going to make a difference, because he got in the back way, because he earned it by the hard work he had aboard his ship. And it really spoke to me the struggles that he had on that ship. As a first-class petty officer, he was putting up ideas on a monthly basis. His chiefs would take them and dispose of them or forget them. I remember one made it up to the desk of the Big XO, and the Big XO sat on it for years, not taking action. And Rich was just dying inside. When he found the CRIC, he was surly. He was a little bit angry and frustrated, but you could see the palpable energy he wanted in the organization. And within 6 months, he changed the way that we approached innovation and how we approached the Navy. And there were two things that really impacted me that I had to think about deeply. One was, and I alluded to this in the opening comments, the Navy has a rightful, strict fraternization policy. Good order and discipline requires the separation of officer and enlisted. But knowing guys like him, Petty Officer Jeff Anderson, Petty Officer Lucian Gauthier, I wanted to be friends with them. I wanted to know who they were as people. I didn't want there to be a separation in who we wore in the uniform ranks, and we had to keep that separation. But that was what, in part, drove me out of the Navy and active duty. I wanted to be in an environment where I could be friends with these folks and glean their insights and understandings. And he showed me the way toward that path. The second was the importance of rank and my own biases. When I met someone in the military, the first thing I looked at was their collar device and the fruit salad they had on their chest. And I said, how credible are you? Well, rank and how many medals you have. And I took that and would then unconsciously, but very palpably, put their thoughts in a box. You know, the enlisted person, what do they really know? Or a senior officer, of course they know best. And this is my own bias towards hierarchy. But it influenced me when I built the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum to have our first conference. And you know what? We're not calling uniforms. The military folks who come into the session with us, all that matters is your ideas and your mind. And I remember 3 years later, I invited my then boss, Admiral Bill Gortney, who was the commander of U.S. Fleet Forces, to give a talk at DEF. And he insisted that he come in uniform. It was the responsibility of an officer to show up in his uniform for the day. And I said, sir, you're free to do that. Everyone else is going to be in their civilian clothes, but I understand your position. He said, Ben, if you're going to interview me, you have to be in uniform too. I said, okay, roger that, sir. So the conference goes on. It comes time for everyone to show up, and I have my uniform. I'm like, sir, I'm not going to change. He looks around and says, you know what, Ben? You're right. Keep your civilian clothes on. Interview me as is. I understand now why you have the environment you do. And that was because of Rich and realizing that everyone has something to contribute. Doesn't matter how old you are, how experienced you are. If you're willing to think, push the envelope, ask hard questions like Meg mentioned, you can have your difference. And the final thing, though, that I love about Rich is his humanity and his flaws. You know, we've extolled his virtues, and he has been a big influence on the Navy. But he's had personal challenges. He's had professional challenges. But his willingness to stand up each and every day and face those head on, pick himself up when things don't go right, and learn from his mistakes every day, striving to be better. As I've gone through a failed startup this last year, I've reflected on Rich's example. What would Rich do in this situation? How would he approach this failure? How would he get better? How would he keep pushing through? That resiliency is something that's influencing what we do. So Rich, thank you, my friend. We love you. I love you. And with that, I want to hand it over to you. Say your remarks.
How do I follow all this up? I genuinely appreciate y'all coming out here. This has been a blast. I think back to all the interactions that I've had over the years with all of you, and I can't express my gratitude enough. You guys have been amazing. You had a huge impact on my life, personally and professionally, every single one of you. And I just appreciate everything you guys have done. And all I would ask is, as I leave the Navy, think about troublemakers around you and try and find those people and protect them. And hopefully they'll bear fruit for you at some point. Okay, well, that's all I've got. Thank you.
We have one last, more formal experience. So Andrew, you want to come up and tour?
So this is to certify that the Secretary of the Navy has awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Gold Star in lieu of 4th Award to Aviation Electronics Technician First Class, Aviation Warfare Richard P. Walsh, United States Navy, for meritorious service and the superior performance of his duties while serving as an action officer for the Strategic Warfighting Innovation Cell for the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Warfighting Development N7 from March 2018 to February 2023. Petty Officer Walsh provided critical support to wargaming, studies, and modeling and simulation across the Department of the Navy. His efforts assisted in laying the foundation and developing data standards for the future use of artificial intelligence. He partnered with scientists and researchers around the naval enterprise to present a regular sync on performance of duties, highlights, and culmination of 20 years of application warfighting and warfighting readiness. Petty Officer Walsh's superior performance of duties highlights the culmination of 20 years of honorable and dedicated service. By his unwavering determination and innovative and complete dedication to duty, Petty Officer Walsh reflected credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Signed, Admiral Hughes, United States Navy.
Rusty.
Been a while.
Supposed to go on the outside.
That's all, folks. Join us for beverages.